गुड मॉर्निंग सर।
Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Umesh sir. Can you hear me? Sir, you are muted, Umesh sir.
Now, can you hear me now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I can hear you.
ठीक है.
We'll
Thank you.
start in few minutes, sir.
Sure. Please. I'm here only. Yeah.
Morning, Praful sir. Can you hear me from here? Okay, sir. Can you hear me?
Absolutely.
Okay. We're gonna start in few minutes, sir.
So very good morning to all of you, to all the panelists, Shri Sukumar Ranganathan ji, Shri Umesh Upadhyay ji, Shri Praful Ketkar ji, and all the students who are here with us on Google Meet, and all the students and media fraternity who are there listening to all of us on Facebook Live, on IIMC Facebook Live page. So very warm welcome to all of you on day 2. This is our session 1, and this session 1 is on editorial freedom in Indian media. And today we have eminent editors with us to discuss this topic with all of you here. First, I would like to introduce my eminent speakers. We have with us today Shri Sukumar Ranganathan ji. He is the editor-in-chief of Hindustan Times. He was previously the editor of Mint, of which he was one of the founding editors in 2006. And he edited between 2008 and 2017, and he had previously worked in editorial leadership roles at the Hindu Business Line and the Business Today. So Kumar
Can't hear anything.
Yeah, I think the problem is with Surbhi's connection. I think she's just gone offline because I
Yeah.
think the rest of us are fine. Hi, Umesh.
Hi, Sukumar. How are you?
I'm good, boss.
Yeah, she will be back in 2 minutes.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Sure. We'll wait for her.
We'll wait.
Yeah.
Morning, Anand.
Good morning, Umesh ji. Mrinal
Good morning.
Chatterjee here.
Hi, Mrinal. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
Good to see you.
It's good to see this also. बैठे हैं आपको सुनने के लिए and सुकुमार जी को
नहीं,
सुनने के लिए।
हम तो सब बाकी लोगों को सुनेंगे, सुकुमार जी को सुनेंगे, प्रफुल्ल जी को सुनेंगे, एंड हम तो सुरभि जी को सुन रहे थे, लेकिन बीच में कुछ ये मशीन का तंत्र ऐसा ही होता है।
Yes.
We've all become patient thanks to technology. I mean, these things keep happening.
Good morning, Sukumar ji.
True.
Good morning.
I'm Mrinal Chatterjee
Good morning, Mr. Chatterjee.
from Dhenkanal campus of IIMC.
Oh, very good. I mean, some of the press people who worked for me have been from Dhenkanal, including the first page 1 editor of Mint whom I hired, Naresh Mathur. I don't know whether you remember him.
Yeah, I do. Thank you. After this pandemic thing, come sometime to Dhenkanal.
Will do.
बिल्कुल आएंगे। देखिए, ढेंकानाल का कैंपस देखना है आकर।
Small little campus. नहीं, हमारे सारे campuses बहुत ही खूबसूरत हैं।
जी।
Now this Kottayam campus is also very beautiful. Aizawl is coming up in a beautiful way. उनकी जो पिक्चर देखेंगे तो बड़ा फ्यूचरिस्टिक बिल्डिंग दिखेगा आपको।
गुड मॉर्निंग मृणाल जी, जम्मू का भी नाम ले लीजिए।
जी, जम्मू तो बन रहा है। ये दोनों तो पूरा बन चुका है। अभी जम्मू का शेप जो है वो और 6 महीने के बाद पता चलेगा कि इसके नक्शे क्या है। These two incomplete now. Kottayam is functioning now.
तो कोई आईएमसी से हम लोगों को बताए कि क्या करना है, हम लोगों को अभी इंतजार करना है।
बस 5 साल
ये ब्लैंकेट चाहिए आपको?
Sir, I'm back. Sorry, there was some technical issue and the internet was disconnected. I'm really sorry for that. So this is the first session of the day, and the session is on editorial freedom in Indian media. I was introducing my eminent speakers, Shri Sukumar Ranganathanji. He is the editor-in-chief of Hindustan Times. He was previously the editor of Mint, of which he was, one of the founding editors in 2006. And which he edited between 2008 and 2017. He had previously worked in editorial leadership roles at the Hindu Business Line and the Business Today. Sukumar, who has degrees in chemical engineering, mathematics, and business administration, is interested in mathematics, science and technology, history of business, new media, and data-based political journalism. He reads and collects comic books as well. Shri Umesh Upadhyay ji is a senior journalist, academician and communication professional with over 3 decades of experience. He completed his MPhil from JNU and he has done professional courses from FTII Pune, Asian Institute of Broadcasting Development, B-Sky-B, London, and Thames Studios, UK. So he has experience of working with Delhi University, Press Trust of India, Doordarshan, Zee News, Sub TV, Home TV, Disha Education Society, and Network 18. He has headed many TV channels as editor and is presently working as president and media director in Reliance Industries Limited. Shri Upadhyay ji is the member of various professional bodies, including the Editors Guild of India. He has been a member of EC of various universities, including IIMC and Makhanlal Chaturvedi University. He has been a TEDx speaker and he regularly writes a column called Rashtra Chintan on current affairs. So we welcome you, sir. The third panelist is Shri Praful Ketkarji. He is the editor of leading English weekly Organizer. He has over 20 years of experience in the fields of research, media, and academia. He is also in the governing council member of School of Journalism in University of Delhi. He was a member of the editorial team of the recently published Complete Works of Pandit Deen Dayal Upadhyay in 15 volumes. That's huge, sir. He is a member of JNU Court and National Book Promotion Council. Comparative political philosophy and comparative civilizations are his areas of interest. Shri Ketkar has worked as a news reader and translator with News Service Division of All India Radio. He was also an assistant professor and head with one of the colleges affiliated to University of Pune. He has a master's degree in political science from University of Pune and MPhil from JNU, New Delhi, in international politics. He has worked at the Institute of Peace and Conflict Studies, New Delhi, as a Ford Scholar and co-authored a book titled Alternative Approaches to Security. He has 2 books, 29 academic articles, 2 entries in Encyclopedia of India. He is a regular panelist on many news channels, and you can see him on channels like DD News, Times Now, ABP News, IBN Lokmat, Republic, etc. on political and foreign policy issues. So I welcome all the 3 panelists of this session today, and we are very eager to hear from you. One by one, I would like to request you to speak for 15 to 20 minutes, and then we will take up the questions from the students from the chat box. So today the discussion is on the editorial freedom in India, Indian media. Actually, in India, Article 19 of the Indian Constitution, it guarantees the freedom of speech and expression for all the citizens of our country, including the journalists and those involved in the dissemination of information and opinion. So by and large, the press, that includes the electronic media also in India, enjoys reasonable restrictions, reasonable freedom vis-a-vis the state. However, of late, the discussion has zeroed in on what actually does freedom of press mean? Does it actually mean the freedom of the journalists working every day, collecting and disseminating information? Or opinion is heavily tilted towards the widespread perception that the freedom of press has now actually come down to the freedom of expression of the owners and of the advertisers? while the working journalists, including the freedom, including the editors and reporters, they hardly enjoy any freedom within the organization. That's the general perception. So editorial freedom, both in opinion making as well as in news content, remains a far cry in the modern media industry. So media industry now, works for more for the profits of the owner, who consider their organization purely as profit making ventures. One of the famous editors, when he was terminated from his organization and he resigned over Twitter, he said that virtually all the major problems plaguing Indian journalism today, paid news, sensationalism, biased reporting, it can all be traced back to the decline of the institution of the editor and consequent absence of editorial integrity. So the perception is that there are hardly any newspapers or news TV channels where the editor is able to operate freely from the day-to-day interference of owners and brand managers. So in many media organizations, the owners themselves, they insist on functioning as editors. So it appears as if the Indian media is in the appalling state, due to the conflict of interest between the editorial and the business side, and the idea of a free press is confined due to the immense pressure from political parties, corporate houses, or the business bigwigs. But so we would like to listen from you yourself, as you have served as an eminent editor in various news organizations, that what is the status of editorial freedom in Indian media. So I would first request Shri Sukumar Ranganathan ji to please address our students in this regard.
Good morning, everyone. I can hear the echo. Could I request all of you to put your mics on silent, please? Or mute yourself, that way it will be... Hello, yeah, perfect. I jotted down some thoughts on my drive here to the office. I've been coming to work every day because I think newsrooms should be open, especially during a crisis like this. Also because many of my reporters are in the field, I think it's unfair that they're in the field while I continue to work from the relative comfort and safety of my home. So I come into work to the office, and our office got a skeletal staff which is operating. So on my drive-in, I prepared some thoughts on what I thought I should speak about, but given that your professor, Ms. Dahiya, has made opening remarks which I feel compelled to respond to, I'm going to start from there, right? And she started off by speaking about the freedom of expression and speech that is granted to us in the Constitution. This is Article 19 of the Constitution, but the same article also places reasonable restrictions. So it's very important. See, and we all have to work in a certain legal framework, a certain constitutional framework. We do have the ability to challenge it, but at the end of the day, this is the broad regulatory regime that is there. And that places reasonable restrictions on freedom of speech and expression and writing and everything else. And the reasonable restrictions have to do with matters related to national security, peace and harmony, communal harmony, a variety of other factors, which is understandable. Which means that if there is a challenge, and it's important to realize this, if there is a legal challenge, whether or not to take action against the person who's writing or the person who's speaking often ends up being the discretion of a judge. And many times this is the lower judiciary. It's not even, you can of course appeal after the lower judiciary acts, but it's important to recognize this. So we do have freedom of speech and expression in this country, but it is not absolute. And I'm just stating this as a matter of fact, right? I mean, it is what it is. It's not changed. We also have fairly stringent regulations on defamation, which most countries do on libel and defamation, except that India is one of the few countries in the world to allow for criminal defamation. In most other countries, defamation is considered a civil suit. a lot of people, and Mr. Upadhyay knows some of them. A lot of people approached the Supreme Court and have asked for this criminal defamation to be dropped, and for defamation to just be a civil violation of the rules. But unfortunately, that has not happened. It still remains viable in India. So India is one of the few countries in the world which allows criminal defamation suits to be filed. There are even countries in sub-Saharan Africa which have sort of scrapped this from their rule book. They don't allow criminal defamation. It's only civil defamation. So it's important to understand these two contexts before I get on to, and I'm actually still going to comment on what your professor said before I move on to other things. One of the issues that I want to, or one of the points she made that I want to take issue with is really the point she made about media companies being solely for profit. And I'm not sure that that is a valid observation. For the simple reason that if you look at return on capital, and a lot of my career I spent as a business journalist. So if you were to look at return of capital, I think there are lots of industries that can easily offer a higher return of capital than media. And there is, at the end of the day, a social objective that I believe all of us are functioning. My organization definitely believes that in addition to everything else we are functioning, we are also performing a social objective. We are performing a very, very important social role. We take our role as the fourth estate very, very seriously. And sure, it helps to have a profitable media organization for the simple reason that if you have a profitable media organization, the commercial pressures on you that can be brought to bear by advertisers, by other people, perhaps even the government, are limited, right? I mean, you are profit making in your own way. You're not. So it's very, very important to recognize that while it's good to be profitable, and of course, I want my company to be a profitable company, our primary motive is not profit. The second thing to understand is that all good organizations and all good newsrooms, and I would like to think that mine is a good newsroom, have Chinese walls between church and state, which means you have a commercial arm of the organization which is worried about revenue, which is worried about advertising, but you also have an editorial arm of the organization which does not go by what the commercial arm wants, right? Which means that the commercial arm might say, please do not carry this article, it is damaging to this particular client. Doesn't really matter. We will still go ahead and do it if we think that it serves the purpose of the larger readers, if it serves other interests, including national interest of our readers, interest of communities. So I just think it's very, very important for organizations to have that Chinese wall, and our organization has that. And finally, I think some points were made about editors and of how you no longer have editors around. And I think this is again an unfair observation to make, simply because I've often come across people who speak about the good old days of journalism when you had great editors. And the truth is, I probably wouldn't even have hired most of them, right? I mean, they'd probably write one dense editorial once in 4 days, the demands of the modern newsroom, the modern integrated newsroom, are far more significant. To be an editor, you need a lot of physical stamina, you need a lot of mental stamina, you need to have in-depth knowledge of a lot of aspects of journalism, right? You need to know how to read and understand data. You need to know how to manage a lot of people. It's not just enough to be an intellectual who can write 1 or 2 edits, or it's a bit of a management job, it's a bit of a research job, it's a bit of a data analyst job, it's a bit of a writer's job, it's a bit of a sub-editor's job, and at the end of the day, you are also the external face of the organization. You have to go out, you have to deal with people. Sometimes you have to appear on fora like this and speak to people. So you need to have multiple abilities and capabilities, and I think those demands are very, very significant. Not everyone has them, so it's not easy to do that, but I still think that it's not fair to say that, oh, the era of good editors is gone or the era of good journalism is gone. I just think that if you look at the quality of journalism that is coming out today, both from the mainstream as well as from niche organizations. There are several people who used to work for me in Mint who have gone out and set up startups. And there's one that deals with technology, Bombay based, which puts out a news item, a large detailed story on startups typically every day. Very good stuff. There's another startup which does long form journalism, one story a week, again founded by two people who used to work for the weekend magazine of Mint, Lounge. Exceptional quality work is being done. The Hindustan Times newsroom and the Mint newsroom continue to produce really good long form stories, in-depth stories, features, database journalism packages, science stories. And I really think that there is a lot of good journalism which is being done right now. So I wanted to respond to Surabhi's comments before I went on to speak about freedom of media. I see the whole question to be, it's important to frame it the right way. And I think the right way to frame it is to look at the other side. I think that to be a good newsroom, to do good journalism, to do my role specifically as a good editor, we need to make sure that we do follow the basics of journalism to start with. It's something that a lot of organizations do not do. I stressed again on the importance of data increasingly. Especially, let me take a particular area where I think the Hindustan Times coverage specifically has left every other newsroom in this company far behind, which is our coverage of COVID. It's something that we saw early. We started covering it really well from January onwards. Others started sort of woke up in March. We've covered it across the realm of policy, implementation, science, data, and all our coverage has been driven by a tremendous focus on science and data. Now, if you do that and you then go out and criticize people, you criticize certain states, you criticize the center, you criticize certain departments on the basis of science and data, there's no one who's really going to stand up and say you're being unfair because your criticism is logical, but it requires hard work before you can do that. And that is something that I want all of you to take away. It's very important. It's very easy to say, oh, you know, I'm not allowed to do the kind of journalism I want to do. Doing good journalism is hard work. It requires you to do a lot of work. And once you do that, if you go out and you write, there are very few, or report in any way, there are very few people who are going to complain about it. The second thing is to understand the context. And it's easily done these days, right? I mean, the other day, people listen to something or they look at social media and say, do you know so-and-so said this? Don't go by what you see elsewhere. Still very important as a good journalist to go back to basics. The good news is these days there are videos available of anything, right? I mean, I'm talking here, I'm sure there will be a video available of what I'm saying here. So if someone says Sukumar said this, it's very easy to go back to the original recording and say, did he really say this or not? And I think there are not too many newsrooms where people insist that the person writing, if the person has not been there, or even if the person has been there, there needs to be a second check on what the person said. It's very easy in this day and age to sort of lose the plot and blur the boundaries between opinions and news and analysis. And I've seen so many loose pieces being written where people ascribe, they attribute or they ascribe motives and agendas to the subjects involved, which is not really the job of news journalism, right? I mean, to say that this particular political leader did this because of such and such, how do you know, right? I think it's very important not to ascribe motives and agenda. And as an extension of that, as a newsroom, our primary role is to look at policies and criticize policies, is to look at policies and appreciate policies. Basically, we critique policies because at the end of the day, these are the policies that are going to have impact on hundreds of millions of people. I think the minute you lose the plot and focus exclusively on personalities. I understand the fact that personalities are important. I understand the fact that it's also important to write about personalities. But the minute you start speaking exclusively about personalities and personal agendas, I really think that you sort of lose the plot, right? Um, I've seen a lot of journalists who start off, especially young journalists, right? I mean, when you're young, you're idealistic. And it's very important at that age to have the right kind of guidance. Right? Many people start off with the assumption that uh, there is this wrong and I will set it right, which is good, right? I mean, it's great to be an activist. It's good to be a crusader. But if you want to do activism, the best place where you can do activism is not in a newsroom. Because, right, I mean, then your activist tendencies take over and influence your coverage of news. There are very few people, and the good news is some of them work for me, who have personal beliefs, but at the end of the day are driven exclusively by facts, analysis, and reportage. And I think it's important that journalists distinguish that. I want to make one other point, which stems from what I just said about activism and your own personal beliefs. These days, many of us are on social media, right? I mean, I'm on social media. I'm sure many of you are on social media. It's very easy for people, and most organizations have social media policies. When I was in Mint, I think we created what was perhaps the first, I mean, Mint was the first newsroom to have a proper social media policy. Back in 2008, 2009, we came up with a social media policy. And HT has a social media policy today. And sure, we all say that, don't, please say that the views are personal. You can say whatever you want to. But as editor of this organization, my personal views are also the newspaper's views. If someone in my newsroom is covering aviation and he goes out and starts criticizing, let's say, one airline, Indigo, repeatedly, and then says, oh, I'm doing it in my personal capacity, the next time he writes an article on Indigo, the company is well within its rights in assuming that, okay, this guy is biased against us because you look at his Twitter feed, it's full of rants against us. So a lot of journalists have gotten to this habit of going out and expressing their personal views, and that sort of shapes how your subjects, the people who are being written about, view the newsroom's agendas or beliefs or filters when it comes to that. And I think that's a dangerous trend. Because you go to meet, let's say, person X from political party Y or company Z, and they start off with the assumption that this person is not neutral, this person is negatively disposed to me, because if you look at this person's Twitter feed, it's got all these things. And I think it's very, very important for journalists and newsrooms to sort of not get caught in this trap. Right. So while it's very easy to conclude, while it's very easy to sort of lament and say like, oh, there's no freedom of expression, my advertisers are not allowing me to do it, the company's management is not allowing me to do it, and more often than not, many of these are excuses. They are excuses for the fact that doing good journalism requires a lot of hard work, requires time, requires effort, requires expertise, requires talent, and requires hours and hours and hours and hours of work. And a lot of journalists don't have that stamina. It's easier to just write a piece which has got 2 facts and 20 opinions and publish it and make it go viral. And then when someone says, this article is not correct, you rant and rave. Or if an editor says, I don't want to carry this article, you say, oh, I'm being censored. So you have to decide what you want to do. And I think a lot of times discussions on whether there is media freedom sort of tend to overlook this aspect of it. I am not for a minute denying that there are legitimate instances where there are commercial pressures, where there are political pressures, where there are other things. But at the same time, if you do many of the things that I listed out in the course of my speech, there will be very few and probably an insignificant number of such instances where you come against a wall that says, you can't go beyond this. So that's it. For opening remarks, I think I'll stop here. Surabhi ji?
So thank you so much, Sukumarji. I'm really happy to hear from you that there exists a Chinese wall and the editorial team has the freedom to say no to the commercial team. That is very, very important, because the general perception that is being framed these days is what I said about. So I expressed that that there is a perception that media is thriving only on the profit making, but as you rightly pointed out, the social objective and the social role of media as the fourth estate is very, very essential. And hearing that from an eminent editor like you is really, a sigh of relief for me, my students, and other professors, I'm sure. And students, as Sri Ranganathan said, you really need to be a one-man army. So in the days to come, you need to learn how to read a lot, how to write, how to be a good writer, a good sub-editor, data visualizer. So you need to have multiple abilities, and I'm sure that classes here will help you learn those skills, and you will definitely become one-man army. So we ensure that, especially in the department. So now I would move on to our next speaker, our next panelist, Sri Umesh Upadhyay ji. Sir, I request you to speak for around 15 minutes, and then we go on to the next speaker, and then take the questions in the end.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me. मेरी आवाज आ रही है?
Yes, sir.
जी. If you permit, I'll like to speak in Hindi and maybe a bit of English wherever is required. सबसे पहले तो सुकुमार ने जिस तरीके से सारी बातों को रखा और फैक्ट और फिक्शन को अलग करने की कोशिश की, और एक फिक्शनलाइज हो गया है पूरा, जो प्रोफेसर दहिया की बात को उन्होंने कहा कि एक परसेप्शन क्रिएट हो गया है, और वो परसेप्शन ओपिनियन बेस्ड ज्यादा हो गया है, फैक्ट बेस्ड कम है। और उसको लेके सुकुमार ने जो बात की, इट वाज म्यूजिक टू माय ईयर्स, स्पेशली अ ट्रेडिशनल एडिटर talking of fundamentals of journalism, which nobody talks about, and my compliments to you, Sukumar ji. And one more thing, that I wanted to say, that he spoke of basic tenets of journalism, media, not opinion, and that's very important. जो उन्होंने लीगल फ्रेमवर्क की बात की, सुरभि दहिया जी ने भी बात की लीगल फ्रेमवर्क की, कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल प्रोविजंस की, उसकी बात मैं आगे नहीं करूंगा। एक परसेप्शन जो सुरभि दहिया, प्रोफेसर दहिया ने संकेत किया फ्रीडम ऑफ एक्सप्रेशन के बारे में, एडिटोरियल फ्रीडम के बारे में, एक परसेप्शन एक ग्रुप ने क्रिएट करने की कोशिश की है, और एक परसेप्शन क्रिएट हो गया है कि एडिटोरियल फ्रीडम पिछले कुछ साल से कम हो गई। ये परसेप्शन है, एक परसेप्शन क्रिएट किया गया है, और खासकर बहुत सीधे कि 2014 के बाद से उसमें कमी आई है, ऐसा एक परसेप्शन क्रिएट हुआ है। वो फैक्ट क्या है, फिक्शन क्या है, इसको जानना बहुत जरूरी होता है। कोई भी कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल प्रोविजन, कोई नियम, कोई लॉ वैक्यूम में काम नहीं करता, वो गिवन पॉलिटिकल वैल्यू में काम करता है, एक इकोसिस्टम में काम करता है, इसलिए उसको बहुत समझना जरूरी है एज ए जर्नलिस्ट। 2014 में 25-30 साल बाद ऐसा हुआ, देश के अंदर ऐसी सरकार बनी जिसके पास पूरी मेजॉरिटी थी एक पार्टी के पास। उससे पहले 1984 में फुल मेजॉरिटी की सरकार थी। और अगर इसके बीच के समय को आप देखें, अगर पॉलिटिकल परिस्थितियों को देखें, तो उस समय देश के अंदर कई पावर सेंटर्स हुआ करते थे जब कोएलिशन की सरकार होती है। और बहुत सारे जब पावर सेंटर्स होते हैं, तो मैं जर्नलिस्ट के तौर पर जानता हूं, क्योंकि मेरा जर्नलिज्म उससे पहले चालू हुआ था, उसके बाद तक चलता रहा। आपको स्टोरी बहुत सारी जगहों से आती है, हर पावर सेंटर से आती है। देश के अंदर ऐसा भी था, कोई अगर एक सिंगल मैन पार्टी थी, उसके लोग भी सरकार में बहुत महत्वपूर्ण ओहदों पर थे। वो एक पॉलिटिकल मिलियू था। तो मीडिया ने उस मिलियू के अंदर काम किया। इसलिए 2014 का जो ब्रेक आया, इन द सेंस कि पहली बार अपने पूरे बहुमत से सरकार बनी जिसमें अलग अलग पावर सेंटर नहीं थे, तो शायद कुछ लोगों ने, उसमें उनके पॉलिटिकल एजेंडाज भी हो सकते हैं, आइडियोलॉजीज भी हो सकती हैं, विचार भी हो सकते हैं, ये कहना शुरू किया कि एक ही पावर सेंटर है। हाँ, तो बात सही है, एक ही पावर सेंटर था। तो इस बात को ऐसे देखना चाहिए कि ये जो पूरा एक परसेप्शन हुआ, और मैं कई सारे क्वेश्चंस भी आ रहे हैं, मैं देख रहा हूं, कई सारे विचार भी आ रहे हैं नए विद्यार्थियों के, और ये बड़ी अच्छी बात है कि सब खुले तौर से विचार प्रकट कर रहे हैं। ये सबूत है हिंदुस्तान में फ्रीडम ऑफ एक्सप्रेशन, फ्रीडम ऑफ एडिटोरियल इन इंडिया। और मैं सुकुमार जी की बात से एक और सहमत हूं, और बिल्कुल सहमत हूं। ऐसा नहीं था कि 2014 से पहले या कुछ पहले एक स्वर्ण युग था, गोल्डन पीरियड था जर्नलिज्म का, और अचानक से अभी कोई जिसको बोलते हैं हाहाकार मच गया है। बहुत लोगों को ध्यान नहीं होगा, मैं बता सकता हूं। ये कोई 88 की बात है, 1988 की बात। राजीव गांधी एक डिफेमेशन बिल लेकर आए थे, डिफेमेशन बिल वही लेकर आए थे। तो ये जो रसाकशी है सरकार, स्टेट और एडिटोरियल फ्रीडम्स के बीच में चलती रहती है। अभी केरल की सरकार एक ऑर्डिनेंस लेकर आई, बिल भी नहीं लेकर आई। राजीव गांधी ने तो वो पार्लियामेंट से बिल पास कराया था, ये तो ऑर्डिनेंस लेकर आए। अभी भी ऑर्डिनेंस समाप्त नहीं हुआ है। उन्होंने कहा है कि भाई अभी इसको हम लागू नहीं करेंगे, बट स्टिल देयर, इट हैज नॉट बीन विथड्रॉन। तो एक हम ये समझें कि जब हम पॉलिटिकल डिस्पेंसेशन की बात करें, उसमें एडिटोरियल फ्रीडम की बात करें, तो उस पूरे इकोसिस्टम को समझना बहुत जरूरी होता है। इसलिए हम जर्नलिस्ट हैं, पॉलिटिकली जिन लोगों को सूट करता है वो एक बात कहेंगे, और जो फैक्ट एंड फिक्शन, आइडियल जिसको बोलते हैं एक्टिविज्म एंड जर्नलिज्म, इन दोनों चीजों को अलग करना ये बहुत आवश्यक होता है। और जब आप इसको अलग करेंगे तो पाएंगे कि ऐसा कुछ नहीं हुआ है जिससे हम ये कह सकें कि कोई ज्यादा पहले कुछ बहुत स्वर्ण युग था और अब कोई जिसको बोलते हैं जमाना बदल गया है, और अब मैं नहीं समझता। भारत में कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन के द्वारा, कानून के द्वारा जो फ्रीडम अवेलेबल थी वैसे ही आज भी अवेलेबल है, पहले थी, लेकिन समय के साथ साथ उसके स्वरूप में परिवर्तन जो होते हैं उसकी बात पर मैं आता हूं। एक जरूर, तो मैंने जब एक इकोसिस्टम की बात की, दूसरा इकोसिस्टम अगर आप कहें, और जो बहुत महत्वपूर्ण है हम लोगों के समझने के लिए, वो है नई टेक्नोलॉजीज का उदय। सोशल मीडिया का उदय। और हम सब आज बैठ के बात कर रहे हैं, मेरे फेसबुक पेज पर भी ये लाइव जा रहा है, आईएमसी के फेसबुक पेज पर भी लाइव जा रहा है। ये एकदम नई टेक्नोलॉजी आई है और इसने दुनिया को बदला है और मीडिया पर सबसे ज्यादा इंपैक्ट किया है। और मीडिया पर जो इंपैक्ट हुआ है उसका असर हम बहुत थोड़ा सा ही समझ पा रहे हैं, और हम वो बहुत समझने की जरूरत है। सोशल मीडिया, डिजिटल वर्ल्ड ने जो क्रिएट किया है वो काफी जटिलतापूर्ण है, और वो सीधे सीधे सिर्फ नागरिक या मीडिया कि फ्रीडम ऑफ एक्सप्रेशन पर ही आघात नहीं करता, कई बार हमारी चॉइसेस पर ही आघात नहीं करता, और मैं आघात इसलिए कह रहा हूं, मैं समझाऊंगा आपको, वो पूरे सिस्टम पर ही कई बार परप्लेक्स कर देता है, उसको समझ नहीं आता कि कैसे। एक उदाहरण आपको मैं देता हूं। जम्मू में कुछ साल पहले कठुआ में एक दर्दनाक घटना हुई थी। एक बलात्कार हुआ था बच्ची के साथ। वो घटना बहुत उठी। उस घटना का इन्वेस्टिगेशन, उसमें क्या फैक्ट है मैं उसमें नहीं जाऊंगा। भारत के कानून में एक प्रावधान है कि आप किसी भी बलात्कार के पीड़ित का नाम नहीं ले सकते। यह कानून की व्यवस्था है, इसमें ओपिनियन का विषय नहीं है। आप नहीं कर सकते। और इस कारण से सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने देश के कई अखबारों को, कई मीडिया चैनल्स को दंडित किया। 10 से 12 लाख रुपए का जुर्माना लगाया उनके ऊपर कि आपने भारत के इस कानून का पालन नहीं किया। लेकिन मुझे अचरज हुआ कि उसी कानून के तहत ये दंड ना तो यूट्यूब पर लगा, ना फेसबुक पर लगा, ना ट्विटर पर लगा। अगर भारत का कानून एक है और वो सेंसिटिव है उन बच्चियों के प्रति, भारत की महिलाओं के प्रति, तो फिर यह दंड तो इन लोगों पर भी लगना चाहिए था। आज भी आप जाएंगे तो वहां नाम मिल जाएगा। तो मैंने बोला ना कि अब जो नया मीडिया आया है उसके कारण इतने जटिलताएं पैदा हुई हैं। और वो जटिलता क्यों पैदा हुई है? जब आप इन बड़े बड़े बेहमत्स, बड़े बड़े एम्पायर्स हैं, ये मैं भी उसका उपयोग करता हूं, जब उनके पास जाते हैं वो कहते हैं हम तो पब्लिशर नहीं है, हम तो मीडिया नहीं है, हम तो प्लेटफॉर्म्स हैं। हम तो प्लेटफॉर्म्स हैं, इसलिए कंटेंट पर हमारा कोई कंट्रोल नहीं है। एक तरफ वो कहते हैं कंटेंट पर कंट्रोल नहीं है, दूसरी तरफ कुछ चीजों को वो ब्लॉक कर देते हैं या कुछ चीजों को एल्गोरिदम आगे बढ़ाती है। तो ये बड़ा अजीब बात है। आप एक टाइम्स ऑफ इंडिया, एक हिंदुस्तान टाइम्स, एक नेटवर्क 18 के पास जा सकते हैं, कह सकते हैं कि भाई ये भारत के हिसाब से, भारत के कानून के हिसाब से नहीं है। लेकिन आप ऐसा ही इन बड़े प्लेटफॉर्म्स के पास क्यों नहीं जा सकते? ये एक सवाल है। और अगर दुनिया की आप पढ़ेंगे इस समय, दुनिया में ये बहस चल रही है, खाली भारत की बहस नहीं है। ये बहस ऑस्ट्रेलिया में चल रही है, ये बहस यूरोप के कई देशों में चल रही है, ये बहस अमेरिका में चल रही है कि कैसे ये जो बड़े बड़े ऑर्गेनाइजेशन, इनफैक्ट अभी मैं आपको बता सकता हूं, 2 दिन पहले ही अमेरिका के 40 स्टेट्स ने तय किया है कि वो फेसबुक के खिलाफ एंटी ट्रस्ट मुकदमा चलाएंगे। मैं फेसबुक के खिलाफ नहीं हूं, फेसबुक का मैं बहुत ज्यादा इस्तेमाल करता हूं, लेकिन ये जो नई टेक्नोलॉजी आई है, इस टेक्नोलॉजी को समझना और उसको सॉवरेन लॉज के नीचे लाना बहुत आवश्यक है। नहीं तो हम एक लेवल प्लेइंग फील्ड मीडिया के स्पेस में नहीं दे पाएंगे। ऐसा नहीं हो सकता कि कुछ पर कानून लागू हो, कुछ पर कानून नहीं लागू हो। जैसे एक और उदाहरण देता हूं, अभी ओटीटी प्लेटफॉर्म्स, डिजिटल प्लेटफॉर्म्स, ऑनलाइन मीडिया, सोशल मीडिया, इनको आईएनबी मिनिस्ट्री के अंतर्गत लाने के लिए एक नोटिफिकेशन आया है। उस पर अच्छी बहस चल रही है और अच्छी है। वाइब्रेंट डेमोक्रेसी में बहस होनी भी चाहिए कि ऐसा कैसे है कि आप टाइम्स ऑफ इंडिया को तो रजिस्ट्रेशन कराना पड़ेगा, न्यू नेटवर्क 18 को तो रजिस्ट्रेशन कराना पड़ेगा, एक अमर उजाला को भी रजिस्ट्रेशन कराना पड़ेगा, उनको कोई एक्रेडिटेशन लेना पड़ेगा, लेकिन बाकी किसी को एकदम छूट है, छूट सबको है। तो यहां फ्रीडम ऑफ एक्सप्रेशन, इसको हिंदी में बोलेंगे अभिव्यक्ति की स्वतंत्रता और स्वच्छंदता, इन दोनों में फर्क करना जरूरी है। समाज की सेंसिटिविटीज जो हैं, हमारे कानून के दायरे जो हैं, उनके मापदंड पर कोई भी कंटेंट देश को दिया जा सकता है कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल प्रोविजन के हिसाब से, उसके बाहर नहीं। सरकार की किसी नेता की पसंदगी नापसंदगी के कारण नहीं, यह महत्वपूर्ण है। अब मैं 2 ट्वीट्स की चर्चा करता हूं और मैं बड़ा उसको लेके अभी एक स्टैंड अप कॉमेडियन कुणाल कामरा साहब, हमारे यहाँ अगर कॉमेडियन की कोई हिंदी करेगा तो बता सकते हैं आप लोग, उसको विदूषक कहेंगे, भांड कहेंगे, जो कुछ भी कहेंगे, विदूषक, यही कहेंगे ना, विदूषक कह सकते। 2 ट्वीट अगर आप देखिए, और सुप्रीम कोर्ट के मामले में ट्वीट्स हैं, मेरे यंग साथी यहां पर बैठे हुए हैं। व्हेन यू शो अ मिडिल फिंगर, व्हाट डज इट मीन टू द चीफ जस्टिस ऑफ इंडिया? Should it be allowed? I feel personally, no. इस देश ने 70 साल के अंदर बड़ी मेहनत से इंस्टीट्यूशंस को क्रिएट किया है। हिंदुस्तान के साथ बहुत सारे देश आजाद हुए थे, उनमें इंस्टीट्यूशंस क्रिएट नहीं हुए। ज्यादातर जगह ऐसी आजादी नहीं है जैसे बोलने की हमारी है। इसकी वजह हमारे यहाँ इंस्टीट्यूशंस क्रिएट हुए। उन इंस्टीट्यूशंस में कोई व्यक्ति है, वो आएगा जाएगा, लेकिन आप इंस्टीट्यूशंस को अगर नष्ट करेंगे किसी भी नाम से, तो वह इस देश की लोकतंत्र और इस देश की आजादी जो हमें मिली है बोलने की, कहने की, अभिव्यक्ति की, उसके साथ खिलवाड़ होगा। अभी सुकुमार बता रहे थे कि डिफेमेशन लॉज की बात है, एक ओपिनियन की बात है कि उसमें क्रिमिनल प्रोसीडिंग्स होनी चाहिए या सिविल प्रोसीडिंग्स होनी चाहिए। ये बात सही है, हमारे यहाँ डिफेमेशन के लॉज बहुत ज्यादा कड़े हैं, पर यह भी उतना ही सही है कि भारत में आमतौर से डिफेमेशन के, पत्रकारिता के मामले में, जर्नलिज्म के मामले में बहुत ज्यादा लागू नहीं किया गया है। ऐसे केसेस ज्यादा नहीं है। जो डिफेमेशन के लॉज लागू होते हैं सिंगापुर के अंदर, यूके के अंदर, बाकी जगह, वहां उस तरह हमारे यहां लागू नहीं होते। नॉर्मली लोग कहते हैं छोड़ो, जाने दो। ये हमारे समाज की तरतीब है, एक सोच है, कहते हैं ठीक है, क्योंकि हम स्वभाव से डेमोक्रेटिक लोग, हम बहुत दूर तक जाते नहीं उसमें। मैंने कहा यह विषय हो सकता है कि आप उसको क्रिमिनल और वो ऑफेंस रखना चाहते हैं या सिविल ऑफेंस रखना चाहते हैं, लेकिन मूल बात यह है कि क्या हम एक तरफ स्वच्छंदता की इजाजत दे सकते हैं? क्या देश का कानून, देश की व्यवस्था, देश का समाज, ओटीटी प्लेटफॉर्म्स की चर्चा हो रही है और मैं बस 2-3 मिनट के अंदर अपनी बात को समाप्त करूंगा। यकीन मानिए कि मैंने 1 साल 1.5 साल पहले से ओटीटी प्लेटफॉर्म देखना शुरू किया, और आप बहुत सारा कंटेंट उसके अंदर ऐसा होता है जो परिवार के साथ, क्या कई बार अकेले में भी नहीं देखा जा सकता। बहुत पोर्नोग्राफी, और उसमें बहुत ज्यादा, मैं किसी एक प्लेटफॉर्म की बात नहीं कर रहा हूं, अलग अलग। तो क्या उसका कोई नियमन नहीं होना चाहिए? क्या कोई कैलिफोर्निया में बैठा हुआ, शंघाई में बैठा हुआ, बीजिंग में बैठा हुआ आदमी तय करेगा कि भारत में क्या दिखाया जाएगा, क्या नहीं दिखाया जाएगा? ये भारतीय समाज को तय करना चाहिए ना। ये सुकुमार सेन तय कर सकते हैं, एक सुरभि दहिया तय कर सकती हैं, एक प्रफुल्ल केतकर तय कर सकते हैं। लेकिन कुछ लोग एल्गोरिदम्स के बेसिस पर यह तय करें कि किसको क्या दिखाया जाएगा, किसकी क्या प्रायोरिटी होगी, यह हमारी एडिटोरियल फ्रीडम को पुष्ट नहीं करता, हमारी एडिटोरियल फ्रीडम्स के साथ थोड़ी प्रॉब्लम क्रिएट करता है। मैंने कुछ पॉइंट्स लिखे थे, जैसे सुकुमार ने भी लिखे थे। आई अंडरस्टैंड डिजिटल एंड सोशल आर टोटली डिफरेंट देन ट्रेडिशनल मीडिया और मेन स्ट्रीम मीडिया। इनफैक्ट मैं तो अब ये बोलता हूं कि अभी तो सोशल ही मेन स्ट्रीम मीडिया है, जहां 80% लोग अपने फोन के जरिए खबरें ले रहे हों और प्लेटफॉर्म से खबरें ले रहे हों, इंटीग्रेटर से खबरें ले रहे हों, तो फिर मेन स्ट्रीम तो वही हुआ ना। इस पर सुकुमार कह सकते हैं कि नहीं, मेन स्ट्रीम तो मेन स्ट्रीम मीडिया है, ठीक है। आप विद्यार्थी हैं, आप लोगों से रिक्वेस्ट करूंगा, एक किताब पढ़ सकते हैं तो पढ़ें। दुनिया के एक बड़े थिंकर हैं, इजराइल के हैं, युवल नोआ हरारी। युवल नोआ हरारी की बड़ी किताबें हैं। एक उनकी जो लास्ट किताब है उसमें से मैं कुछ कोट करना चाहता हूं, और यही फ्रीडम के बारे में है, सोशल मीडिया के आने के बारे में। और किताब का नाम है 21 लेसन्स फॉर 21st सेंचुरी। 21 लेसन्स फॉर द 21st सेंचुरी। ये किताब का 7वां पन्ना है, और ये लिखते हैं, एंड आई कोट, द revolutions in biotech and infotech are made by engineers, entrepreneurs and scientists. Please mark these words. The revolutions in biotech and infotech are made by engineers, entrepreneurs and scientists who are hardly aware of the political implications of their decisions, and who certainly don't represent anyone. They only represent, now I'm quote khatam kar diya, they only represent their company's interest. And then he writes further, can parliaments and parties take matters into their own hands? At present, it does not seem so. इस बात को समझा के आई अनकोट अपनी बात को समाप्त करूंगा। आज एडिटोरियल फ्रीडम के लिए मैन वर्सेस मशीन ये एक इशू है, कभी अलग से इस पर बात हो सकती है। मशीन ये तय कर रही है, एल्गोरिदम्स ये तय कर रही हैं कि कितना देखना, क्या देखना, कैसे देखना। हमारी चॉइसेस को वो बहुत ज्यादा इंपैक्ट कर रही है, और ये चॉइसेस इंपैक्ट करने वाले लोग रिप्रेजेंटेटिव लोग नहीं है। वो कोई मार्केटिंग का आदमी है, कोई एल्गोरिदम अपने कमरे में बैठ के बे एरिया सैन फ्रांसिस्को में वो तय कर रहा है। इसलिए बहुत जरूरी है कि हमारी एडिटोरियल फ्रीडम्स को जारी रखने के लिए समाज की सेंसिटिविटीज के साथ, हमारे कानूनों के साथ, हमारे संविधान के हिसाब से जो नियम, कायदे, कानून हमारे बाकी मीडिया के लिए हैं, वे इनके लिए भी होने चाहिए, इनके स्वरूप के अनुसार। इट कैन नॉट बी स्वच्छंदता। तो इसी बात के साथ आप युवल नोआ हरारी को पढ़ें, बाकी लोगों को पढ़ें, और फ्रीडम ऑफ एक्सप्रेशन, एडिटोरियल इंडिपेंडेंस, एडिटोरियल फ्रीडम आपको समझ में आएगा। आप जर्नलिस्ट बनने वाले, पढ़ना बहुत आवश्यक है। इतना जरूर बोल सकता हूं कि ये देश फ्रीडम ऑफ एक्सप्रेशन का देश है, 1947 से नहीं, पिछले कई हजार वर्षों से। यहां एक दूसरे के विचार को सुनना, उस पर शास्त्रार्थ करना, शास्त्रार्थ करके मानना या न मानना, यह परंपरा रही है। ये परंपरा तलवार के द्वारा दूसरे को जबरदस्ती कुछ मनवाने की परंपरा नहीं है। यह डेमोक्रेटिक ट्रेडिशन, मानसिकता कैसे जारी रखे और सोशल मीडिया की ब्यूटी के साथ, उसके इनोवेशन के साथ, उसकी इंडिविजुअलिटी के साथ हम कैसे उसको संभाल के रखें, ये मुझे लगता है आईआईएमसी जैसे इंस्टीट्यूशंस का काम है, जो पॉलिसी मेकिंग में मदद कर सकते हैं, और आप जैसे यंग प्रोफेशनल्स जो कि नई चीजों को ला सकते हैं नए तरीके से। थैंक यू वेरी मच।
Dhanyawad, sir. Thank you so much, Mr. Upadhyay, for reconfirming to all of us, that editorial freedom is not fettered, and that this is not just, and that this is just a perception that editorial freedom is fettered now. So I think this perception, as you rightly pointed out, was framed somewhere in 2014 and onwards. And we really need to understand, students, we really need to understand the power and the impact of social and digital media, as sir has rightly pointed out. And I would also like to thank sir for giving tips to students about what to read, because that's really important for all of us, for all the newcomers especially. This direction is very, very important. So we'll get back to you soon, sir, with questions. I think the chat box is flooded with the questions that students are writing, so I'll take a few questions, whatever the time permits. But as of now, we move on to our third panelist, Shri Praful Ketkar ji. Over to you, Shri Ketkar.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Subi, other faculty members of IMC, my co-panelists, Sukumar ji, Umesh ji, and my young friends. I will just point out one fact which you may not have, taken cognizance of. In India alone, there are 67 fatalities of media friends. That is what I could gather from the news available. So maybe in interiors or small media groups there can be many more, but who have actually laid down their lives during COVID crisis because of infection while doing their duty as a journalist. The number all over the world recorded is around 454 in 56 countries. This is the recorded number. That shows the kind of role that Sukumar ji had referred in his opening remarks. As a journalist, we have played an incredible role during the crisis time, and we should be proud of it. Two, I come from an organization which has fought for media freedom almost since inception of our constitution. Even before the constitution came into existence, the first censorship in India was used against Organizer Weekly. And the reasonable restrictions that we talk about today in 1901, they are thanks to that case that was fought in 1950, and the judgment was delivered in favor of Organizer. the censorship was revoked. Again in 75, K.R. Malkani then was the editor, who was the first person to got arrested. So there is a legacy where every now and then, we had to fight, and therefore I am for all, responsible freedom. And I use this deliberately, responsible freedom. Now, what is that responsibility when I say about this? You must have understood what Mr. Sukumar has said and Mr. Umesh Upadhyay has said, that when we are talking about editorial autonomy, we are talking in the context of two different entities. One, vis-a-vis state, the government, the state, the external milieu, the constitutional and legal framework. Within that, how much editorial autonomy we really enjoy. And the second reference point is within the organization. Within the organization, whether you are, the media house owners or the advertisement department or the director board of the company or whatever, are they actually controlling our editorial content? My experience has been, whatever restrictions we are talking about today, they have been there to some degree right from 1950s, especially 1954, since the DAVP and the advertisement policy officially floated. And always, during COVID-19 scenario also, you must have realized that, depicting the Kerala model in global media or even in Malayalam media would be different from what is being depicted in English media. Similarly, depending on the advertisement revenue of the company, of the government, how much that government is questioned. We have seen this scenario. So this has been there. If we are talking about, and I'm not talking about this party or that party, this government or that government, but this has been there in media, because ultimately media has to survive on some. If I give you a lecture and sermon that, oh, this is a noble profession, and that's why you have to live on meager salary, and your company will be always non-profitable, and it is always, though it is true what Sukumarji has said, that return on investment, editorial department is always seen as, just investment thing. Other all departments are actually revenue generation departments in media industry. So my point is, whether we are talking about the reasonable restrictions from constitutional point of view, please try and understand. There were many questions in the chat box related to one of your seniors, Prashant Kanojia, and the other was about Siddiq Kappan. Both these cases are related to not about criticizing a government, and therefore equating it with 1975 is a misnomer, and legally and media wise also it is a wrong way to interpret it, simply because one issue is related to a mock picture and news floating through social media platforms. The other is related to creating disharmony within communities using your media card on behalf of some organization. So these are two different cases. They are not, if you are using media platforms and you are using a journalist card also, there is an equal responsibility you have to carry. As a journalist, I also post on social media platforms. I can't say that this is not my responsibility. You have to take the responsibility, and reasonable restrictions imposed by the constitution are applicable to each and every individual, including journalists. There is no separate laws for media. What is there for media is self-regulatory mechanism. what not naming the communities, not naming caste or community in the context of riot-like situation. These are the self-imposed certain guidelines that have come up, which are being violated due to a social media explosion, and now many ways we are getting I will come to that scenario also. But the point is, we should see this evolution historically. Every time some new media platforms have emerged, whether radio, whether electronic media and television, and now digital and social media, always these kind of questions were raised about what will happen to media, what will happen to print, whether media freedom is being curtailed. These questions are always. So I would request you to see this journey of Indian media historically, right from pre-independence period, right from Regulation Act, how we have evolved as a media. By and large, Indian media have been, because state is always seen as repressive. State is always seen as curbing freedom. So questioning policies, questioning government, questioning state. Now, the second aspect that I need to emphasize, about the editorial autonomy within the organization. Now, as a state or as a system, we have a constitution and constitutionally defined norms related to free speech. Similarly, I believe that every media organization also has its own editorial policy. While taking a job in that organization, if you are aware what is that editorial policy, if somebody is saying that we are completely objective and independent, and that's why we can write anything we want. Sorry, every media house has certain ideology and policy on certain issues. If somebody is shying away from it, that person is lying. So my point is, what are the constitutional freedoms as well as restrictions, and if you are joining certain organizations, you are well aware what is the editorial policy of that organization. Within that editorial policy framework, I believe that by and large, don't go by these indices created by certain media houses or research organizations. Okay, they can be useful pointers to understand where we are lacking. We can take certain clues, but please try and understand the parameters that they have developed to understand and analyze media. I don't think in last 8 to 10 years, the way and in which words our present Prime Minister is abused on various platforms. No one in the global scenario would have accepted this. In fact, one of very senior journalists made a very nasty comment on Prime Minister's birthday, and I asked her, ma'am, would you have done the same thing in your print or written content? And she said, perhaps no. But what to do? These platforms are so impulsive that you can't control yourself, you react. The point that I'm making is, we need to take into consideration, as a journalist, we need to understand that we are privileged in terms of responsibility, not just in terms of freedom. As far as freedom is concerned, the same rules are applicable on us, especially on social media platforms, as they are applicable to any other citizen. Two, when we are working in an organization, organizational editorial policy is there. I know if I'm working for organizer has certain editorial legacy, advertisement policy, and I will abide by it. If I really want to really want to make it make certain amends in it, I will propose it to the management. I will make the things, change the things in our editorial policy, and then accordingly I will as an editor, and I have done that on certain occasions. Thirdly, the point that I want to insist is, we need to understand that not just the media industry, but entire society is in transition. We are in a phase of transformation, and you are lucky. Your comments are suggesting, in a way, it is good that you are coming with certain positions, certain understanding about the profession, even certain political positioning you are you are free to make while joining your course. But at the same time, there is a danger lies in this media revolution and the kind of communication that we are caught into. That particular problem I call as the crisis of binaries. Please try and understand this carefully. This is not just about biases. This is the problem of binaries. When you start seeing world as we and they, when you start seeing world as pro-India, anti-India, if you start seeing world as pro-Modi and anti-Modi, this is a very dangerous proposition, because without going into the details of the issue, you start taking positions. You just reconfirm your opinion on the basis of defined positions. And there lies the danger for journalists. What is happening with most of the celebrity handles on social media, as well as some of the celebrity journalists, especially in electronic media, is that they are caught in this crisis of binaries, because this crisis of binary also leads to the crisis of credibility. Many people are asking how to, you need not teach people. People are smart enough to assess themselves. Many of the journalists have lost their credibility because of their duplicity on certain issues, because they had taken certain positions on the basis of this problem of binaries. So you and there I feel that many people talk about idea of India. I would request you, if you really want to be truly democratic, true spirit of media freedom, then I would request you to understand what is true idea of India, or I would like to call true idea of Bharat. True idea of Bharat lies in multiplicity of opinions on certain every issue. There can be different paths. Ekam sat vipra bahuda vadanti. The truth is one, but there are many ways to reach to the same truth. The world is not divided in we versus they. That is idea of Bharat. There can be many ways and many angles to the same story. That is idea of Bharat. We are not just diverse cultures. We are one culture that celebrates diversity. The philosophical foundations, the basic values of journalism will remain same. But new platforms will come. They will be integrated. You can approach the same story from different angles. And therefore, this is in a way a challenging situation, as well as it throws a lot of opportunities for us. It is a challenging because anybody can use this platform and call themselves as some form of journalist. But at the same time, you need to understand that they do not carry the similar kind of responsibility that we carry with the a card or the designation that is given to us as a journalist. So I would request, as earlier panelists also said, don't compromise on legwork. Please get away, because social media and this entire culture of getting news from social media feeds has reduced the culture of legwork. Young journalists should always focus. There is no alternative to hard work and legwork. There can't be real news sitting on the table. Table news is always going to be problematic. Two, the nature of media is changing, and therefore you have to go beyond just news. Detailed analysis, yes, it may not be always opinionated. You can give both the sides of the same story or multiple sides of the same story. But what we need to understand, that we have to give a complete picture which is beyond a Twitter feed or the headlines given on electronic media for the morning news. And lastly, the kind of journalism, and Sukumar is perhaps the best person to elaborate on that, the kind of importance of data that is gaining, we have to keep upgrading our skills with the changing scenario to sustain ourselves in the changing. If we really want to maintain our autonomy, then skill upgradation and maintaining our credibility is key to maintain that autonomy. I thank IMC and Professor Surbhi Dahiya for giving this opportunity to share stage with in front of all of you, and with very senior journalists like Mr. Sukumar and Mr. Umesh Upadhyay. Thank you so much.
So thank you so much, Shri Ketkarji, for giving your valuable opinion and comments on this topic. And I think all the students were listening very, very carefully. And I can see a flood of questions in the chat box and also in the Facebook Live comments. So though students, we will not be able to take all the 69 questions that we have received, but of course we'll take 6 to 9 questions with the panelists. So we'll just take a few questions. And the first question is, are the citizen journalists changing how the editors look at information to be newsworthy? So if you could answer it, Mr. Upadhyay. So Anveshan Bose has asked this question. I'm naming the student. So are the citizen journalists changing how the editors look at information to be newsworthy?
There are two parts to your question, Anveshan, my answer. One is that I talked a whole lot about digital media and social, basically in terms of regulation, but I must say that digital and social media has led to democratization of information. It has led to various sources coming. Yes. So citizen journalists, where citizens are bringing information. Now, it is a more deeper question. It's all welcome, because then, information gathering is not limited to a few.
I think, Surbhi, you will have to mute yourself.
Yeah, we may not be, but the issue is when it, gets into the realm of propaganda, fake news, and then that's a serious issue. So one, I say, yes, digital and social have led to democratization, more information coming to citizens, to different sources. It's very good. I welcome it, but proper controls on agenda-driven news, facts, which we call sometimes, हम लोग आपस में बात करते हैं ये व्हाट्सएप यूनिवर्सिटी आजकल चलती है, आजकल व्हाट्सएप यूनिवर्सिटी के प्रोफेसर बहुत हो गए, और उसमें वेरासिटी उसको कंफर्म करना। मैंने जिस किताब को आपको बताया था, पढ़िएगा, उसमें बताया गया है कि हर चीज को वेरीफाई करना। आई होप आई आंसर योर क्वेश्चन।
Thank you, Umesh ji, for taking up this question. I would request Sukumar ji to take the next question. We have a question from Miss Anamika Yadav. So she asks, particularly, how hard or easy it's been for you as an editor to maintain the credibility and stay ethical during this time when, you know, sensationalism and yellow journalism is at its peak. Sukumar ji.
At one level, it's very easy, right? But at another level, it's very difficult. And I know this sounds a very contradictory answer, but let me explain. I've written extensively on this. I think what happens is we live in an age where there is information overload. There's information coming at you from all corners. And I particularly like Umesh's answer because citizen journalism is all well, but the same filters will have to apply, right? I mean, if you're an editor, you have to have the same filters that you have for good journalism, because you can't just take it and run it saying, oh, there's someone in Tirunelveli who's posted that this is happening in his thing. You have to verify it, you'll have to ascertain it, you'll have to look at the context, right? I mean, you'll have to do all that. You just can't take it and run it. So I think the important thing for us is to have very strong processes in the newsroom on how you deal with information and follow those. And if you do that, it's fairly simple, right? I mean, it is not difficult at all. Someone else might, it's very easy, right? I mean, everything can be written in a sensational way. Someone else might take something and write it in a particular way. But at the end of the day, if your newsroom has certain processes, and these are simple processes, right? I mean, let's say X says something. First, you have to ascertain that that person did say something. Second, you'll have to ascertain the context in which that person said. Third, you will have to speak to other people who are affected by this and see what it means. It's all basic journalism, and as long as you have a clear process for following it, it's fairly easy. Now, the problem is, I think even big newsrooms get blindsided sometimes by the demands of time, right? And by the fact that there's just so much news that's coming in that someone might make a lapse and then it doesn't get checked. But the only way to cure this is to really have excellent processes, excellent systems, and communicate to everyone that these systems and processes must be followed.
Right, sir, right. So the next question is from Himanshi. So Prafulji, she asks that why can't a journalist have personal opinions beyond newsrooms? Isn't it important to draw this line to allow freedom of opinion beyond jobs? Prafulji, are you there?
Absolutely. Means I
Yes.
believe that individual and he has every right to, like any other individual, he has right to express his opinion. But as Sukumarji also said earlier, when I know I'm carrying a tag of editor organizer, I can't just shy away from that responsibility, whether I am expressing my opinion as Praful Ketkar or as editor organizer. Whichever way I look at it, people are going to perceive it as organizer. So we have to be, that's why I said responsible freedom. You can enjoy that freedom because you call yourself as part of the fourth estate, you are fourth pillar of our democracy, you have that added responsibility. Express your opinion, but defend it. You express it within the parameters given by, you can't morph the news, you cannot fake the narrative, and say this is my opinion. I could not carry it in, there were certain journalists who were posting certain things about the COVID situation in Maharashtra. They were putting it on their Facebook pages. I was very, especially in the initial phase, and I was very, amused, and I asked them, why you are saying here, when you have a platform, you at least mention half of this on your, and they openly said, sorry sir, we can't do that in Marathi media. We can't do that. So I told them, okay, fine, that you are, so can I quote you as a journalist, and you as a journalist is posting this? So they said, no, we are putting this as individual. So that much of, and there comes the issue of freedom in the real sense, in the context of state. It is not about that editorial autonomy was just under constraint. It was the state that was acting against expressing or putting across certain facts related to COVID-19 situation in a particular state. There lies the trick, I believe. And therefore, we have to carry, if we are carrying the badge of a journalist, we have to carry this additional thing of responsible freedom also. We cannot have other social media activists and journalists on social media cannot work in a similar fashion. Simple rule that I'm putting.
Right, sir. Very true. So, Sukumar ji, the next two questions are for you, and I'll ask them together. So, the first question is by Piyush Kumar. So, he says, to what extent, proprietors' other business interests govern the editorial policies and freedom with regard to what can be covered or not?
Okay. And what is the second question?
Yeah. Second question is asked by Cherish Purohit, and he says that, and he specifically asked this question for you. So he says that, why can't news pieces and headlines be, as read as, be read as the incident that happened? I think there's some grammatical mistake in this. But anyways, why are most headlines driven by communal agenda? And don't you think this instigates violence even when the real incident had no role, of religions or caste in that particular matter? So that's a little bit personalized, I think.
Okay. No, it's a... Sorry, someone's mic is on. It's a good question. The second question is a good question, but let me answer this in part. The first one is, I'll answer it at a generic level, and then I'll also answer it at a specific level. At a generic level, I would say it depends on the editor in question, and I would say that it is the proprietor in question. Right? I mean, it's a function of what these two people want, how one wants to be seen in terms of owning a newsroom and what it does, or a news channel or a newspaper, and what the editor feels about it. So that's at a generic level. I know it's a very generic answer, but it is the truth. At a specific level, which is probably the only thing that I can speak about, and I've worked in three media organizations, just three media organizations in my life. All three owned. I mean, HT is the first public limited company that I worked for, right? I mean, it's a listed entity, so it has a board, it has a chairperson, and all that. And perhaps because of the nature of the organizations I work for, and everyone wanted to ensure that the journalism was recognized as top notch, there is practically zero influence in terms of what happens. Sure, there is feedback. Sure, there is both appreciation and criticism. But that you would get in the normal course in any respectable organization, irrespective of the business that is therein. Because none of us live in a world where you cannot be held responsible or you cannot be held accountable, right? So irrespective of your designation, whether you're a minister in charge of one of the most important portfolios in this country, or you're a journalist, you will get feedback from people, you will get feedback from your organization on whether you're doing something is whether they think it's a good idea, whether they think it's not a good idea. But so I would not call it interference. And in my own personal experience, as you can see from the newspaper, because all my life in journalism, I've been driven by a very simple philosophy, which is to be an equal opportunity offender, right? I mean, you do that. It basically means you don't have an agenda. You see everything the way it is meant to be seen. So it doesn't matter. The second question is a good question. And the reason it's a good question is simply because this is something that I tell my newsroom very often. When you bring caste, class, and religion into a story, then you can bring it in if it has a material impact, right? So if you're writing about a crime, and let's say the victim happens to be a person from the marginalized classes, mentioning the marginalized classes makes sense if the crime was motivated or prompted by the fact that the person was from a marginalized class. If that had nothing to do with it, and this person was driving a car and some people, carjackers, held him up and beat him up and did it, they would have done it to anyone, irrespective of the class. To bring that into that story is irrelevant. So I think it's important to make sure that people realize this. Doesn't happen all the time. Like I said, there are times when things slip through the cracks. So, which is probably what he was referring to in terms of headlines and copies and everything else. But the simple rule is, I think it makes sense to qualify as the class, the caste, the religion, the background, if it has a bearing on the news item. If it has no bearing on the news item, then there's no point in mentioning it. I hope I've answered this question.
Yes, Sukumarji, this was a very relevant answer. Thanks for that. And Ananya Srivastav asks you that how do you think the newsroom can strike a balance between commercial and editorial aspects, being socially responsible and profitable at the same time? And your last question, Sukumarji, is that how did COVID impact on HT, because it impacted print journalism? So Kritika Nautiyal has asked this to you. So these are the two questions that I ask you once again, and then I go to one more question for Mr. Upadhyay and Mr. Praful before we wind up.
Sorry, the first question was what? The second question was on COVID.
The second question was by Kritika Nautiyal, and she asked...
What was the first question?
Okay, first question was by Ananya Srivastav, and she asks that how do you think the newsroom can strike a balance between the commercial and the editorial aspect, being socially responsible and profitable at the same time?
Okay, I think it's very important to have rules. It's very important to have advertising rules. It's very important to have sponsorship rules. It's very important to sit across the table from the business folks, because at the end of the day, you're all part of the same organization. There is a Chinese wall between the two of you, but there needs to be a certain protocol. So I can only give you my own example. In both the newsrooms that I worked in this organization, both in the Mint newsroom and in the HT newsroom, I have been the single point of contact for the other side. It's not as if every business person interacts with every journalist. And we sit across the table and we have a fairly well laid out set of rules on what we allow and what we don't allow, because at the end of the day, both the business side and the editorial side realize that it's a matter of the brand, right? I mean, it's a matter of our credibility, it's a matter of what we stand for, and both our success with readers and our success with advertisers actually emanates from the same thing, which is the strength of the brand and the credibility of the content that we put out. If you are not a credible organization, there are very few advertisers who are going to come and advertise. So our motives are aligned, our objectives are aligned. Then it's just a question of coming up with the rules and saying this is what we allow, this is what we don't allow. And we actually have explicit set of rules that guide most of the situations that we are faced with. So that's the first question. The second question, yes, COVID was a significant, I mean, it did change a lot of things. For us, I think we've been an integrated newsroom. Our content goes both on the print and on the web. we were fairly big digitally even before all this began. And once it began, I think we've become even bigger digitally. So the primary reach is through digital, especially because the physical distribution channels were blocked, especially in Bombay, not so much in Delhi. In Delhi, we are now back to around 70–80% of where our circulation was. But in Bombay, there are many societies which are still not allowing newspapers to be distributed there physically. So our primary delivery mechanism becomes digital. And I think at the end of the day, if you have good content, if your journalism is good, you will find an audience. Your platform may be different, but you will find an audience.
So that's great. So, sir, I have to take one more question from you. This is from our faculty member, and I have to take this question. So he asks you, when newspapers and magazines like NYT and WAPO, economists, etc., publicly declare support for presidential candidates and can report accurately and fairly about other candidates, then why, according to you, individual journalists are not allowed to express their personal views and report fairly and factually about issues and events? This is by Professor Dr. Anand Pradhan. It's in the chat box.
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think it probably stems from I think the quality of systems that you have in a lot of those newsrooms probably ensures that this doesn't happen. And I just think that in India, what tends to happen is that if a person goes out and expresses a public opinion, and then goes out and does a piece, which is either critical or uncritical of that person, it just reflects a certain conflict of interest or a bias or a pre-existing bias. And in many cases, this holds true even in the US, right? Because I think the question it has to be a little more nuanced than what it is, because you're asking about organizational support for candidates, because these are entire organizations that support candidates. The Wall Street Journal will say we are endorsing so-and-so. The New York Times will say we are endorsing so-and-so. These are the editorial boards of that organization which are endorsing something. And many of these newsrooms, just like our own newsroom, the editorial side is independent of the news side. The editorial side might have an opinion which is entirely its own, which is very different from the news side's opinion. And because the news side anyway doesn't get to reflect its opinion, it just reports the facts. Whereas what I had spoken about, and the question seems to be about individual journalists. So it's not about the newsroom expressing its opinion. It's about an individual journalist expressing an opinion, saying, I like this person, I like this company, I don't like this company, this works for me, this doesn't work for me. Then obviously that person has established that he or she has a certain bent of mind, a certain narrative, a certain philosophy. There is clearly going to be an allegation of bias. And it's a bit like Caesar's wife, right? I mean, you need not just be virtuous, but you should also have to be... Hello? Sorry, you need not just be virtuous, but you should also be perceived to be virtuous. And I think that is very, very important for a newsroom. It's not enough that I'm neutral or unbiased. It's also very important to be perceived as neutral and unbiased, because both matter equally importantly.
Now unmute yourself.
So I said thank you, Sukumar, for answering this question. We have the next question for Umesh ji. Quickly, we'll take these last two questions. So what are the basic duties of a journalist? Of course, we'll be teaching you all this in the class, but he wants to ask Umesh ji that we have been fighting this boy Ayush Pawar says that as a journalist, we always fought for our rights. But according to you, what are the basic duties of a journalist? He's asking. Okay. Just give him 2 or 3 basic ones.
पहले क्वेश्चन का आंसर देने से पहले आई जस्ट वांट टू कॉम्प्लीमेंट सुकुमार and you know he was talking about digital HT and he I mean for last few months Sukumar, I need to tell you that you have made it my first port of call for any news. I can tell you this much. It was not earlier. And then for, you know, and you said about COVID coverage, and I mean every word of it. पहली चीज मैं देखता हूं तो एचपी की साइट पर जाता हूं and it has done really well. Thank you. बाकी जो सवाल का जवाब है पवार जी के, देखिए बहुत साफ है. सबसे पहली बात है बेसिक ड्यूटीज ऑफ जर्नलिस्ट. पहली बात तो खूब पढ़िए. First thing that you should have some knowledge. One, check your facts. Don't go by opinion. The problem is that if you see, and you know what, and I'll finish my answer in that. Somebody asked about, you know, citizen journalist. Over the years now, you will not be, you know, the most important thing in any journalist will be credibility. And the credibility and trust is earned over years of hard work. And that hard work comes from your knowledge, checking of your facts, फैक्ट और फिक्शन को, अपने ओपिनियन को और न्यूज को अलग करना, जो बार बार कुमार भी बता रहे थे, डॉक्टर आनंद प्रधान के क्वेश्चन के आंसर में भी उन्होंने दिया. जब हम ओपिनियन को, अपने विचार को अपनी न्यूज में डाल देते हैं तो आपका ट्रस्ट और फेथ का फैक्टर डिमिनिश होता है. आई थिंक अगेन रीडिंग, फैक्ट एंड ओपिनियन को न्यूज से अलग रखना, ये प्रैक्टिस में लाना, इस स्किल सेट को लाना, आई थिंक मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट फॉर एनी जॉब.
Thank you, Umesh ji. I would now move on to the last question of this session to Mr. Praful Ketkar. So students are asking, Ayushi Anand is asking, data journalism has brought a paradigm shift in the industry. So how should budding journalists prepare themselves to understand and analyze data? Though we in the department, because these are all the newcomers and they're asking this question, we also have some of the workshops conducted for them for data journalism. But she's asking you this particular question, that how should they prepare to understand, analyze, and visualize data?
Thank you for asking this question. Before taking this question, I just want to make a remark about a question that was raised by Professor Anand Pradhan. See, the problem is this tag of objectivity and being independent political analyst. You can't be both. You know, you on the one hand you will be taking sides, on the other hand you will be calling as, you know, yourself as independent. As I said, every media house has an editorial policy and ideological bias. So is every individual. You should not be pretending about, you know, objectivity and independence and at the same time taking certain positions. That leads to credibility crisis. I think journalists have to be careful about this. As far as this transformation in media industry and data analysis, and see, I started my career as a, you know, on the ground as a, you know, literally as a surveyor or a data collector for newsroom when TV Today started its formal alliance with CSDS, and I was collecting data on the ground. As a student of political science, it was an eye-opener for me because the responses. So please try and understand, data is not just objective. You have to have a context of the data. Who is collecting that data? What is the context? How the questions were formed? Whether they were leading questions or multiple choice questions, who were the, you know, agencies involved in collecting that data. I think developing certain sense about this. So for this, you need to have, in a country like India, having you know, sense of our social cultural diversity and still inherent unity involved in this entire social milieu. That has to be experienced, and you can't experience that by just seeing a data. You can't experience that just sitting in your newsroom. You have to experience that on the ground, or otherwise you can't cross question. I can give you multiple examples on this, because there were certain data when I moved up in the ladder and I was actually analyzing election data. I had to ask multiple questions to the people who were sending that data, because I could just ask them what was your mode of transport while reaching to that particular booth, and by asking this simple question I could make out whether that data is authentic or not. That much sense I had about those booths. So I think this is one. First sense is verifying data and understanding the human errors involved in it. That is the most critical aspect. You can't understand this, you can't learn this just by sitting on your laptop or your tab or sitting in your newsroom. You have to learn that on the ground. Two, there are various tools that are evolving. There will be many people who will be handling data on your behalf. There can be professional statisticians, there can be professional people who are working on certain programs. They will be working on certain variants. Like for example, again giving example from election analysis, there is always a tricky business in election analysis that is involved about converting your vote percentage into seats. Now that is a very tricky business. Now if you don't have a sense, both political sense as well as the technological sense, the person who is coming from technology background can always mislead you when it comes to interpreting that data. So you have to have this balance between the political sense and technological sense. So upgrading your skills technologically and sharpening your skills when it comes to, or sense when it comes to the socio-political context of that data, both these things go hand in hand, and it's a continuous process. If you learn how to do that, if you develop that as a habit, I think you can wonderfully develop yourself as data analysis, and in fact do very good stories based on data.
Thank you so much, Prafulji. This topic is so interesting that we can go on for ages, for hours, and the panelists are so eminent that students would like to ask umpteen questions and any number of questions, but because of the
Surbhi,
paucity.
can I say something, Sukumar?
Yeah. Yes, sir. Please.
See, if you think it helps, I'm happy to have my own data editor, also spend some time at IIMC and probably or help take the students through what needs to be done. I have some fairly good people, and
Yes.
Since we are
Thank you.
since the medium of instruction is going to be online, I think it will be fairly easy to do it, so we can get this done.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Sukumarji.
Yeah, no, I mean, we are happy to help.
Thank you so much, Sukumarji. It will be an honor for all of us to learn from your digital editor and data journalists, and our department will be, indebted to HT for that, because students need to learn, and we've been calling experts from BBC, from other organizations, also, to teach them. And this topic, as I said, is very, very interesting and go on for hours. And, our panelists are so eminent that we would like to listen to you more. And I request you to please, join with us some other time and have a detailed discussion over some topics. So today, I'll have to conclude here. I thank all the panelists from the core of my heart, because in another 5 minutes, we'll have Mr. Subhash Ghai joining all of us to talk about cinema in India. And students you can take a 5 minutes break and then rejoin, to listen to Mr. Subhash Ghai. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, students. Thank you, media fraternity. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello.